This video is brought to you by Sailrite. In this video, we'll walk you through the steps required to make your very own Roman shades. We're going to show you how to take measurements, how to sew them up, how to attach rings and hardware, and how to install them in your window. A full materials list is located at the end of this video, so you can purchase fabric and supplies to do it yourself. Let's get started and show you how it's done. We'll start by discussing our design and measuring the window. Hi, I'm Eric Grant with Sailrite, and today we're going to show you how to install a Roman shade on a few windows. We're going to install this Roman shade as an outside mount, which means that we'll be mounting it on the outside of the window frame here. So the first thing you need to do when you're making a Roman shade is take some measurements. You basically need a height measurement or length measurement, and you need a width measurement. And the measurements are basically dependent upon how you want the Roman shade or what you want the Roman shade to cover. Since ours is an outside mount, going to be mounted up here, and we're going to be using a black out fabric as the lining for this window, we want to try to block out as much light as possible, but yet we still want to see some of the oak trim. Notice the shade on the left using blackout drapery fabric blocks light entirely, while the shades on the right allow some light to filter through the fabric. So we're going to basically measure, approximately there. This is up to preference. Obviously there on this side as well. We're going to mount the headrail up about this far. Then when the Roman shade comes down, we want it to stop without touching this sill down here. So right above the sill. So to do that, let's take some measurements. First, let's get the length measurement. Our headrail will be installed at the top, approximately there, and we measure down just right above the sill. And then for the width, since this is going to be an outside mount, we're going to measure a little bit inside the window trim to this side. And we're going to write those measurements down. We're going to leave this roller shade on the window and still mount our Roman shade up there. That's one of the reasons we're doing an outside mount on this window. Thus, we can use either the Roman shade or we can pull this shade down. This shade obviously lets light diffuse through it. The Roman shade, since we're going to be using the blackout fabric, will make it totally dark, except for obviously some light will come through the sides and at the bottom. So we're going to leave the roller shade on and get to work. Before we get started making the actual shade, we want to show you two sets of shades that have already been completed in the same room. These two shades are mounted using an inside mount system. They're not mounted on the outside of the window frame as our previous one was. They're mounted on the inside. Let me climb up here and show you a little bit more about that. Let's remove this decorative fabric to get a view of our headrail underneath on this inside mount window. Here you can see the headrail, and we screwed directly through the front of the headrail into some wood trim. You can also use a drill and drill underneath the headrail through the board and into wood trim on the ceiling if you're mounting in that direction. If you're screwing through drywall, we recommend using drywall anchors. So that's how we installed this headrail on an inside mount system. Let's go ahead and put the decorative fabric back up via the Velcro. On this window, we have a roller that opens the window. So where do we want the Roman shade to stop? Again, it's totally up to preference for the end user. In our situation, we've designed it to stop basically midway or a little bit on the lower portion of this roller. So if the roller is positioned as it is here, the Roman shade will come and fall right in front of it. If the roller is positioned here, then the shade's going to fall here and it'll be a little bit slack. So let's lower the Roman shade and show you what it's like at this position and also show you what it's like at that position. Let's start here. That looks pretty good. Now let's position it in slightly a different location and see what happens. As I talked about, it's a little bit on top. It's not the optimal position, but it still works fine. After considering the design and taking measurements, it's now time to show you how to make the shade. Let's start with patterning. The first step in creating a Roman shade is to cut the fabric to size. We're going to take the measurements we just took from the window and calculate what size fabric we need to cut for the decorative fabric and also for the lining fabric. If you have multiple shades and the decorative fabric has a pattern, you may want to take into consideration where the pattern repeat will fall. Sometimes the repeat looks best directly across from adjacent panels, as it is seen here. It is always up to your preference and is not the rule. We've made the calculations for our window and are figuring where we want the pattern repeat to fall for our shades. For us, this yellow flower will be the center of our shade. We will mark the fabric to size and cut it out with scissors. Cutting with scissors is acceptable, but using a rotary fabric cutter makes a cleaner cut, so we will switch to that tool next. When using a rotary cutter, you must use a self-healing cutting mat to help prolong the life of the blade. Here Angela is marking the opposite side of the fabric to the width size we calculated for earlier. Then she strikes a line at the appropriate spot on the decorative fabric. After the line is struck down the length of the fabric, she will rotate the fabric around so she can more easily reach the cut line to cut it out. Since we are making 2 shades for our window application, we have a length that will accommodate for 2 shades and also takes into consideration the pattern repeat of our decorative fabric. Now the decorative fabric is cut to size for our width measurement. Next, we will take measurements for the length or height of our shades, taking into consideration the added amount of 8 inches in our previous calculations. Strike a line at that location on the fabric and cut. As discussed earlier, we have decided to match up our patterns so it's directly across from each other for our 2 shades. You may want to stagger the pattern, or it just might look good anywhere. Floral patterns often look good almost anywhere when more than 1 shade is required. Here we are laying our first decorative panel cut to the correct width and length on top of the remainder of fabric to match up the pattern. Then we will mark it to size and cut it out in the same manner. Since we are matching up the pattern, we have some waste at the bottom of this length of fabric, but that can be used to wrap the headboard or possibly decorative pillows. Our 2 decorative panels are cut to size. Next up, the lining fabric. We will cut the lining fabric to the same length or height measurement of our decorative fabric we just cut. That was the finished height plus 8 inches. However, the width of the lining fabric should be the finished width minus 1 inch, which is smaller than the decorative fabric we just cut. Saorite stocks a couple of choices for a soft and very light lining fabric. We are using soft line drapery lining fabric here. However, if you want to block the sun from shining through the fabric shades altogether, then we suggest you use the Softline Sweet Blackout Drapery fabric sold at www.saorite.com. In fact, it's my personal favorite for Roman shades because it is a slightly heavier lining fabric, which makes construction a little easier. Why? Because it lays flatter when fabricating and when completed provides a smoother working Roman shade operation. The shade seldom wrinkles above the folded pleats when being pulled up due to the heavier weighted lining fabric. This shade is made with a soft line drapery lining fabric. You will notice that at the pleats it sometimes wants to wrinkle as it is being raised because the fabric is so soft and light bodied. We believe that the desired look is more important, so pick the lining fabric to suit your most important requirements, blocking the sun or allowing light ambiance to filter through the fabric. Our decorative fabric and lining fabric has been cut to size. Let's start sewing. Here we are showing the lighter drapery fabric in white laying on top of the decorative fabric. Outside surfaces are facing each other. This lining fabric does not have a right or wrong side, but other brands of lining or blackout fabrics may. We're going to match up one of the long edges so the raw edge is flush, and we will sew a row of straight stitches about a ½ inch from the raw edge. Do some reversing to lock the stitch in place at the beginning and end of your sewing. We like to use the Deluxe Magnetic Sewing Guide to help guide the fabric as we sew it. This helps keep the stitch line consistently spaced from the raw edge of the fabric. If you do not have this guide, you can also just place masking tape on the bed of your sewing machine to help you guide the fabric. We are sewing this shade with the Saorite Ultrafeed LS1 sewing machine. This is a heavy-duty walking foot sewing machine that will also sew lighter fabrics like this. A standard home sewing machine will easily sew this type of project as well. Angela did not pin the fabric in place, but that may be helpful to keep the edges lined up for you. Next, match up the opposite long side of the decorative fabric and lining, and repeat the process. Now we want to center the lining, or blackout drapery fabric if you use that, on the back side of the shade at the bottom edge. Do not yet turn it right side out. A slight warning here. If you worked hard to match up a pattern repeat, you must be certain you are working at the bottom edge and not the top edge of the shade. To ensure that it is centered, we will measure the folds at the sides to be sure they are the same, and then we will use straight pins to hold it at the bottom edge. Be sure the fabrics are laying flat before sewing. You can pin the bottom edge if you like to help hold everything in place. Then take it to the sewing machine and sew a 1/2 inch from the raw edge here at the bottom. Notice that when she stops sewing to adjust the fabric, Angela will bury the needle by hand using the sewing machine's balance wheel, so she does not lose her last sewing position. Now we can turn the assembly right side out. The assembly now takes the form of a pillowcase. The corners may be rather stubborn to turn right side out completely. You can use a straight pin to help motivate them if needed. It's time to center the lining fabric on the back side of the Roman shade. Use your yardstick and straight pins to consistently line up the decorative face fabric's edges on the back side of the shade. Be sure everything is laying flat as you measure and pin the sides. We are pinning through to catch the decorative fabric on the bottom side as well. After it is pinned securely in place, use an iron to press the fabric along the folded sides. If the pins come out when ironing, that's okay. They are simply used to ensure that the sides are even. After the ironing is done, they will be removed anyway. At the bottom edge, it's a good idea to press the fabric along that edge also. Before doing that, ensure that the seam is splayed out. Ironing the entire shade to ensure that it is flat is a good idea, especially if using a lighter lining fabric on the back side. Be sure to follow the fabric manufacturer's recommendations for ironing for your particular fabric. At the bottom edge of the shade, a hem/sleeve must be created to hold the bottom weighted bar. This sleeve should be about 2 to 3 inches in size. Before sewing the sleeve in place, it is always a good idea to check to be sure that your desired finished height, plus at least a 1/2 inch of extra fabric for a hem at the top of the shade, can be achieved. Sometimes sewing and ironing can cause change to the overall size of the shade slightly. If so, you can make modifications to the size of the sleeve to accommodate a sudden change in size if needed. Once that sleeve or hem is determined, you can pin or iron it in place. Always ensure that it is straight and true before sewing it in place. Then sew a single row of straight stitches along the inside edge about an 1/8 inch or so from the edge, as shown in the video. To help keep the bottom rod or weighted bar inside the sleeve, sew a bar tack stitch up from the bottom edge on the sides. Sew up about 1 inch or slightly more, but leave room to slide the bar inside the sleeve. Roman shades often have ribs or dowels that are spaced along the height of the shade to help the fabric pleat or fold as it is pulled up. To calculate for the placement of these ribs, we will use Sayorite's fabric calculator. Visit Sayorite.com and type fabric calculator into the search. Click on Window Treatments, then select Roman Shades. Simply type your desired finished width and height measurements into the appropriate fields. Enter the quantity of shades desired. Let's start with just one. Enter the decorative fabric's width you have selected to use. If the fabric's pattern repeat placement is important to you, enter the vertical repeat of the fabric here. Used for multiple shades only. The horizontal repeat is seldom used for shades, so we'll leave it at 0. Click on the Calculate button. Instantly see how much fabric you need. You will also see the correct location for rib or dowel placement along the length of the shade. Plus, you will see the recommended amount of lift lines and the length of lift line required. Scroll down a little more and you will see a rendering showing the shade with dashed lines for ribs and circles for rings. Let's change the quantity to 2 and see what happens. The amount of decorative fabric has increased, and since we entered a value for a vertical repeat into the calculator, it automatically determined how much extra fabric will be needed. Scroll down the screen and notice the rendering has also changed, showing 2 panels with scrap fabric in between. Now that is easy. In lieu of using Sayorite's fabric calculator, which I highly recommend, let's calculate the requirements for our Roman shade with these equations manually. In this illustration, you can see a Roman shade detailing where the lowest and highest segments are, and also the main segments. This illustration shows 9 segments and 8 ribs or dowels. So after using Sayorite's fabric calculator or figuring the placement of the ribs manually, we are now ready to mark the location of each rib on our shade. Starting from the bottom of the shade and measuring up from the finished edge, we will mark for the lowest segment with a pencil. Then up from that mark, we will mark for each main segment. This shade has 9 segments, so it will have 7 main segments. Once it is marked on one side, fold it in half and carefully line up the edges to mark the opposite side. Unfold the shade and use a yardstick or straight edge and strike a very light pencil mark across the shade at each of those locations. Be sure the fabric is flat and no wrinkles are present when marking each section. For this Roman shade, we're going to use iron-on Roman rib tape, and we will secure it to the back side of our shade. Another option is to use wooden dowels and to glue them to the inside of the shade, in between the decorative fabric and the lining. That technique works well for Roman shades, but it does not allow you to remove the dowels and wash the shade if it becomes dirty. So we have opted to use iron-on Roman rib tape available at www.sayorite.com, so the ribs can be removed for washing if required. Angela has cut the required amount of iron-on Roman rib tape to size, equal to the width of the shade minus about 3/4 of an inch. The iron-on tape has been placed over the pencil line so it is centered over the line and so the sides are even, slightly off from each edge. The side with the glue on it is facing the shade. Using a steam iron on a high setting, go over the entire length of the iron-on tape until it is secured well to the shade fabric. Repeat that procedure for each rib location. Here you can see this Roman shade with all the iron-on Roman rib tape secured. Here is a second shade we are making using the same decorative fabric, but for the lining we are using the Softline Sweet Blackout Drapery fabric instead. The iron-on Roman rib tape here is a neutral color. It too bonds well to this acrylic side of the lining. It also sticks to the polyester side, which is on the inside of this shade. We will now turn our attention to finishing the top edge of the shade. To do this, let's confirm the desired finished length by measuring from the bottom edge up. Remember that we added extra fabric to the length of our cut panel for the bottom sleeve, slight shrinkage which may occur, and for a small hem at the top. We want to now trim the top so that we only have about a ½ inch of extra fabric at the top to create a single hem at that location. Here we are trimming away the extra fabric with our rotary cutter and cutting mat. A length of looped Velcro 1 inch has been cut to the finished width of the shade, and now we will create a ½ inch hem at the top edge and sew the Velcro in place over the top of the hem at the same time. If you find it helpful, you can use straight pins or a seam stick with double-sided basting tape to secure the hem and Velcro in place prior to sewing. Here, Angela is not doing that. Sew a second row of stitches along the bottom edge of the Velcro as well. Next, we need to make a head rail for the shade. The board need not be fancy. The size of the board is not crucial, except that the side that the cord lock is to be affixed to should be about 1 inch thick. Our board is finished about 1 inch by 2 inch. We need to cut it so it's the same length as the width of the finished shade. You can wrap the board with your decorative fabric or the lining fabric. Simply cut it oversized to wrap around the board on all sides. Then staple in place. We are using the Dual-Fast EIC-3118 electric stapler available at Sailrite, but a simple lever action Arrow brand stapler will work as well. Over the fabric wrap, on the side which has the seam, secure along the side a 1 inch hooked Velcro, the same length as the board. Staple it in place along the top edge. Rings are typically started on the first rib at the bottom. Skip every other rib to the top, as shown in this illustration. Rings are usually spaced from the left to the right about every 15 to not more than 20 inches apart. To install the sew-on rings for shades, we will use a length of thread and a hand needle. Sew the ring in place along the top edge of the iron-on tape, avoiding the pocket opening so a rib can be installed in the opening in a later step. Insert the needle and push it through the tape and lining and the decorative fabric, and then bring it back through. The rings that run along the sides of the shade should be spaced about 2 to 3 inches from the finished edge of the shade. This spacing will typically keep the lift cords from hanging up on the ends of the ribs when operating the shade. Be sure the ring is very secure. You do not want them to come untied after a few months of use and have to re-sew them in place again. Sailrite sells metal rings. Unlike the plastic rings, which often get brittle in the sun and eventually break, ours will not. We will show only one ring being sewn in place on our shade. We will skip forward to the next step. Here's what the front of the shade looks like with the ring sewn in place. You can barely see the stitch. We will use Roman shade plastic ribs sold by Sayorite for our shade. These are easily cut with a hacksaw or utility scissors to size. They should be cut to the same size as the length of the iron-on tape, which is slightly smaller than the finished width of the shade. If you plan on gluing dowels to the shade instead of using the iron-on tape, you might have to use wooden dowels, as some glues will not stick to these plastic ribs. They can also be extended for wider shades by using splicers for plastic ribs, again, sold by Sayorite. In the bottom sleeve, a weighted bottom rod needs to be inserted to weight the shade and make the cord lock work properly. Sayorite sells a bottom rod for fabric shades that is a 3/8 inch rod. Ours needs to be cut down in size. Usually it's about 1 inch shorter than the finished width of the shade. It can be cut with a hacksaw. Here we're using a bandsaw to save time. Once cut, file off any sharp edges. This rod could be extended for larger width shades by using a rod splicer, which is sold separately at Sayorite. To assemble the headrail and lift lines, we're going to switch to the Roman shade, which was made with a blackout drapery fabric as the liner. Same process, different Roman shade. Secure the headrail via the Velcro so the shade is flush with the top of the board. Move the board with fabric attached down the length of the shade until you reach a row with rings attached. Our shade has 3 rows for lift cords. Yours may be different. Mark the location on the bottom lip of the headrail where each ring is located. We will use an awl to pre-punch a hole in our pine board for the installation of the screw eyes. Screw eyes can be purchased at a hardware store or even Walmart. Screw the eyes into the bottom lip of the headrail board at each location where you marked for a ring falling. Then we will use a 5/64 inch leech line Dacron rope as our lift line. Each row of rings running vertically should have its own lift cord. They should be cut to size so it's about the length of the shade plus the width of the shade. Tie the end of the leech line to a ring at the bottom of the shade and run it vertically up through each ring until you reach the screw eye. The cord lock can be installed on the right or left side of the shade. We will attach a cord lock on the right side when facing the front. So here on the underside, it goes on the left side. Because of that fact, all of the lift lines will feed towards the left side of the shade, where the cord lock will be installed in the next step. Feed the lines through the rings and eyes as shown in the video. The shade is fully extended, and the lines are pulled so they are fairly snug. Here at the location where the cord lock will be installed, we can cut the lines so they are about 12 inches long. Sayorite sells a small and large cord lock. This is the small one. For more information about the cord locks, visit the Sayorite website. It should be installed as close as possible to the last screw eye. Before installing it on the headrail, we will install the lines into the lock. The cord lock has a hole on one side that is small and a hole on the other side that is larger. Grab the lift line end that is on the side where the cord lock will be installed. Then feed the line through the small hole, then down from the top through the cam locks and out the bottom. Using a pick or tweezers is helpful to grab the end of the line. Next, insert the lift lines from the opposite side of the cord lock into the larger hole and repeat the process. Angela is feeding 2 lines into the lock at the same time. That may or may not be as easy as just feeding 1 line at a time. Using tweezers to grab the line's end is helpful once the line or lines passes the cam lock. Try to distribute the lines evenly between the wires on the underside of the cord lock. It is okay to have more than 1 line between each of the small wire openings for larger shades which require more lines. After feeding the lines through, you may want to tie a knot to prevent them from passing through the lock accidentally while we screw the lock in place to the headrail. Using 2 screws, not provided with the cam lock, secure the lock as close to the screw eye as possible on the bottom lip of the headrail board. Untie the knot if you made one. Next, we will install a cord condenser. This condenser does just what the name implies. It condenses the multiple cords into one. With the shade being fully open and the cords being fairly taut, cut all the cords at once so they are about 5 to 6 inches below the cord lock. Feed the lines through the top of the condenser. Be sure the lines are even and tie a knot so the condenser is about 2 inches away from the bottom of the cord lock. Cut away any extra line past the knot and push the bell-shaped condenser over the knot, concealing it. Now we will insert a length of cord through the condenser bottom and tie a knot. Use the provided plastic washer if your cord is too small to stay in the bell-shaped bottom via the knot. Then screw this bottom onto the top of the condenser. If you have not yet done so, feed the bottom weighted rod into the sleeve at the bottom. Also feed the ribs through the iron-on rib tape. A tassel can be installed to the end of the cord. It is usually attached so it rests near the middle of the shade when it is fully open. Next up, we'll show you how to install your Roman shade. Alright, we have the Roman shade made and the Velcro installed with the headrail behind it. Nice thing about the Velcro, before you install it, you can remove the actual decorative fabric and the black outlining on this one and gain access to the headrail. Now I've already installed screws on the ends where I know it needs to be screwed up on the window. So we've done that in advance. We're ready to install the Roman shade, and notice the fabric, it just hangs loosely down below, so all we need to do is attach it to the Velcro. So to do this, all we need to do is position it where we desired it on our frame and then screw it in place. Okay. Then we Velcro it up, and if it's not straight, we make adjustments to the Velcro. Another nice feature of the Velcro. There we go. Coming up next is the materials list. You can find almost all the hardware, tools, and even the fabric at Sailrite. We have hundreds of decorative fabrics that would work great for Roman shades. Many of our customers ask if a Sunbrella marine grade or awning grade fabric would work for Roman shades. The answer is yes, and those Sunbrella fabrics typically do not need a lining fabric. To help you determine the quantity of items you will need to purchase from Sailrite, use these simple equations. You may want to pause the video here. Next up, we will show you the items that may need to be purchased from a hardware store and the tools that may be required to do it yourself. If you have questions or comments about this video, write them in the comments section of this YouTube video. We will do our best to answer them quickly. Any questions regarding the products or fabrics sold by Sailrite, give us a call. We are more than happy to assist you in purchasing the right products for your next DIY project. For more free videos like this, be sure to check out the Sailrite website or subscribe to the Sailrite YouTube channel. It's your loyal patronage to Sailrite that makes these free videos available. Thanks for your loyal support. I'm Eric Grant, and from all of us here at Sailrite, thanks for watching.